Basketball. Since I was a kid, I fell in love with this game. And when I'm gliding through the air, it's like pressing mute on everything else. Jace Carson has arrived. New season, new level.
Get your butt to school.
Layla.
Given all of your options, you have to decide. Do you want to be good at the next level, or do you want to be great?
Distractions are often demanded. Don't offend me, I'm a bandit.
At Cedar Cove Prep, I expect you to be acutely mindful and acutely prepared. Not just on the hardwood, Mr. Carson. Understood?
Understood.
Jace has got too much riding on his senior year. We need to know he's with someone who will watch his back.
You did say if I ever needed anything.
Swagger prep on 3. 1, 2, 3.
Something horrible stopped because my best friend stepped up and did something about it.
Unfortunately, I don't think it'll be likely that things will work out for him.
All the work you've done, you were so close, and you put it all at risk.
I had to.
You could go to jail.
Jace, who else was with you that night?
Let's go, let's go.
He attacked a man with the help of 3 others.
Everyone is watching. Now is the time to stand with the kids. Our school's reputation is at stake.
I feel like I'm drowning. Don't let other people's opinion become my reality.
Come on.
The world ain't ready for what's about to happen. Not even close.
Look in my eyes, I feel like a god. I'm on the rise.
Hi, Reggie. Carolyn Foster. Here's what happened in Carolyn Talks podcast. Thank you so much for speaking with us today. And we're focusing on episode 205, but what I want to talk about is what 205 encapsulates, but what also a thought I had from the beginning of the season, which was, there's a song by Bob Marley where there's a verse. It says, "Release yourself from mental slavery. None but ourselves can free our minds." And that phrase from that song kept going through my head from watching episode 1 in the second season. And then it made me think about how basketball is a mental game, like you have to be on it all the time. And like, you have to be on your game, your tip-top game as a basketball player playing any sport. But then going into 205, this thought kept coming back into my head because it's about where you are mentally, like these young boys inside this juvenile detention center, they're physically in prison. They're always being constantly watched, but it's also about where they are mentally. Like, can they picture themselves having a life once they're out? Like there's a boy with the little boy Nico where he's just dancing in the rain, and I'm just like, it's all about where you are mentally. And then the name of the show is Swagger, and a lot of people think swagger is a verb. It's not. Swagger is an adverb because it's about, for Black people, it's a mental state. It's like you have swagger because of how you carry yourself and how you see yourself and how other people perceive you. So talk about how this particular episode, and then just the whole concept of the show, is about where these young Black people and the adults in their lives see themselves and how other people see them. Because I think the show is really about how Black people, or how young Black people and how young Black boys have to learn to see who they are for themselves and not depend on society to tell them who they are and who they can be.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. I mean, I think you speak so much also just like about really like the urgency of community, right? And just this idea that, community at its best, we look out for each other. We look out for our kids. Like, it's not just, I'm looking out just for mine. And, when like a community of people are targeting our kids and that we're under attack, even from like the literature that needs to be in schools and education, like take it out. Like what? We can't have Toni Morrison up in there, Lorraine Hansberry, James Baldwin. When you talk about like psychological slavery, there's a book that I read, like, I think when I was just in college, called Chains and Images of Psychological Slavery by Dr. Naeem Akbar. And so like it really does run deep and in so many different spaces and areas. And, what's interesting for us, like we have to give you a show that's entertaining. Like, we're not a documentary, not eyes on the prize. We're swagger. Show's got to be hot. The music's got to be hot. And if you see the show and you're just like, damn, that music was hot, that ball playing was hot, and that's all you get, I'm at a point where it's like, okay, cool. That's good. But like your questioning and your radar and what you're really leaning into is I really hope that we all lean into as a community, which is like, how do we raise our kids up, men and young women on all levels, from the literature, from the coaching. I've seen coaches. I've seen some great coaches, first of all. I've seen some great coaches that really care. I've seen some great educators that really, really care. And those people are heroes, and those are the people that really have swagger. But on the flip side, I've seen coaches yell at like 14-year-olds and curse their asses out like you wouldn't believe. That if somebody talked to them that way, there'd be a fight. And what about the mental health aspect of that kid that has to go home and then like kind of face that team and a coach again? And then there's like something that happens a lot of times on the team. It's like, you don't really want to talk to your parents about these images because then you feel like, you know, you're not being strong. So it's such an interesting balance. And some of what we do is present solutions, but a lot of what we present in our narrative are questions as well, because they're not always up to us to answer. But I think if we're challenging perspectives in an entertaining way, we're doing our job.
No, I agree completely, because I think one of the aspects of the show that I think people should really pay attention is teaching adults to look at kids differently, you know, like, because adults have their own preconceptions. You know, even for the Black adults, they went through the same things, but once they become adults, they're so caught up in their own ambitions and their goals, they forget to think these are Black kids, you know, these kids are still struggling. So I think the show really does pose its questions for adults to say, how am I looking at the Black kids in my life? You know, am I judging them the way that white society and white supremacy tells me to judge these kids? So thank you so much for giving the show that particular aspect, because I think it's especially very necessary in today's world.
Yeah, thank you. And just because of your line of question, I'm going to tell you like a quick, you know, personal story. Hope I don't get in trouble with it, because one of it has to do with one of my kids, you know. But, you know, one of my sons was, my oldest son was playing basketball, he was on a basketball team, and really doing a good job at wanted, but didn't really seem to have the coach's favor, you know. So props to him. He told me that he reached out to his coach and he set up like this private session with the coach to just go over some of the things and how he's supposed to run the plays. I said, okay, cool. So I'll meet you there. He wasn't old enough at that age to be driving. All right. So I go to the school, to the gym to pick him up. And it's like, maybe, you know, I got there, you know, it was an hour session. And I'm a little curious, so I get there a little bit early just so I can see the work they're putting in. And my kid is just kind of there, just kind of half-heartedly shooting around the ball. And the coach didn't show up. And by the way, my son did it all right. There's text messages confirming. The dude just didn't show up. You know, so now you got to kind of like deal with that aspect of it. And then like as adults, we are supposed to have a certain level of you know, responsibility here, and to not even really like sort of be like, oh, you know, I'm really sorry, or this happened, or just, you know, yeah, let's look for another time. And my kid never did it again, and why would he? You know, but you know, on the flip side, I've had, you know, educators and folks that have coached my son that are the total opposite. But it's really scary how much influence these coaches have on our kids. And so you really just hope that they are doing it for the right reason and that they are putting the kids first.
Okay, and thank you for sharing that. So for my first question, I asked you about the mental state and the mentality of the characters, and about always having to learn and them having to basically free themselves from the expectations that society has on them. I want to now talk about the constraints, because the interesting thing about episode 205, and it's a through line from the first episode in the season, is about playing by the rules. Again, basketball, as I said, is a game about is about your mentality, about always being at the top of the game, but it's also a game about rules. You know, like you can foul someone, but it's about how you foul them. You know, like are you going to do it in a way that's not going to get you thrown off the court? And then in the scene, the scene that I really love with the debating scene with those two young actors that I think did such a phenomenal job in their scenes is about it. Like the teacher says, it's not about how passionate you are. It's about are you debating by the rules? You know, and that's such a heartbreaking thing because like you're on the side of this young man, but he's not going to win the debate because he didn't do his resolve at the beginning. You know, he didn't do citations, and he's like, I'm giving myself as a citation. I'm talking about from my own experience, and he's like, you got to give a notable citation, and that's a thriller from the beginning of the season. And it's about the whole concept of the show where for these young boys to become like Division I players to go into the NBA, they can have all this amazing talent, but they still got to play by the rules. They got to play by society's rules. You know, they got to play by the expectations that the adults have on them. They got to play by the expectations of the schools. You know, they got to play on but they have to abide by these arbitrary rules that they don't even know exist from the people sponsoring them. You know, the discussions the teachers are having and the parents are having, they're having all these discussions about constraints, and these young men have no clue what's going on behind the scenes. You know, so I want you to talk now about how in constructing this aspect of the show, because I think it's such a very important part of the show where we're talking about, especially as Black people, there's so many rules in society that we have to abide by, you know, and they're not written, but we just know that they exist, you know, like when we go in as Black people, we go into spaces, we are very cognizant that people look at us differently just because we are Black. And that's the rule, you know, so talk about that.
Well, you know, first of all, one of the things that, one of the things I really looked at in that scene, I was really asking myself, you know, who is this instructor, right? And so I really love to actually, like, there's so many social issues that inspire much of the work I do, but I wanted to know, like, who is this instructor? And so, you know, I kicked it a lot with my co-writer, Raquel Baker, on this. And we envisioned him as someone who was volunteering, that maybe he's a debate instructor at some other, you know, sort of school or college. And he's coming in here to make a difference. And he's been there long enough to see people get out of the detention center only to come back or to maybe not make it. So I was really thinking about this guy and I thought, well, he really believes in Marcus, this brilliant young person who gave a brilliant debate, was brave enough to be vulnerable, passionate enough to be vulnerable, and also be very intellectual, very academic. But he's not going to let him slip. He's not going to give him a pass because society isn't going to give him a pass. So that's why he had to come hard and say, you can follow the rules. And that's where he was coming from, as a character standpoint, which really ultimately really does, you know, push our narrative more so. It's like, where's the character coming from? But it is an interesting thing because, yes, there are rules that we need to abide by or expected to abide by, but we also like love the people in our community who've broken the rules. And so it really comes down to, so let me just say, when I think of swagger and I think of that word, really think about it meaning a cause bigger than yourself. Having a cause bigger than yourself, right? So if you think about John Carlos and Tommy Smith, like, if they were just about themselves, they're just about their paper, they get up on that podium, they stand straight, and they're good. They don't have all the sort of traumatic experiences that happened to them after the 1968 Olympics. They'd be good. They didn't have to take this on, you know? But it's because you have a cause bigger than yourself. They got up there and they broke the rules. So, you know, when we talk about the rules, I think it's really like, is it a just rule? Is it a rule that needs to be broken? And really maybe the foundation, the grounding of that should be the cause bigger than ourselves, the community that we deal with. And I'll just say this quickly because I've been like holding off, kept saying, I don't really want to get into this when all of you ask your questions. You know, you ask the question, you say episode 5 or episode this or episode that, because this is like so real for us. And thank you for giving a shout out to Gina, by the way, earlier. And, you know, it's like filmmaking isn't just something we do, it's something we believe in. And so I'm giving you so many long answers because I believe in where we're going with this. And so we say maze. We say maze 1, maze 202, maze 203, maze 204. We had a jar in our writer's room, and if somebody said episode, they have to put $1 in the jar. You know, so why do we say maze? Because we are really understanding that with our narrative and where we need to be right now with our culture is that we have to tap into, so our storytelling is not a straight line. It has twists, turns, obstacles, and opportunities. It's a maze. Our maze, our storytelling aligns with the civil rights movement. It aligns with Reconstruction. It aligns with our ancestors, and we stand on their shoulders and we need others to stand on our shoulders. So we're in this maze. And so I wanted to give that to you as well, because when you talk about the rules and stuff, like so much of what it is for us is grounded in this maze that we are shaped in. In a maze, you can decide to stay stuck, be free, like, you know, but so much of this journey that we talk about is really grounded in that. And so there are several times that I encourage, you know, my sons to break the rules, you know, you know, and they could just be small or big. And because ultimately we always want to, you know, like one of the rules I would honestly break as a kid quite a bit was my mother. You know, shout out to every single mother out there. You know, my mother would work as a RN. She would work these double shifts. And then she would come home like around midnight. She'd get off at midnight, ride the train from 135th Street and get off on the number 2 train. And it would be like 1 a.m. Now, one of her rules is that my ass would be in bed because I had school. And I would break that rule every now and then because I wanted to make sure moms came home safe. So it really kind of comes down to when we think about rules and how we move through the world, is like there are rules that people impose on us. Sometimes they're well-intentioned. Sometimes we need to follow those rules. But really, ultimately, what we really need to do is like follow our heart and understand we have a cause bigger than ourselves, and let that be the rule, the North Star for us.
No, I appreciate you giving all these long answers. I love when guests.
I can go quick. Answers. I can do like sound bite, but I was like, well, it's just me. I don't know. I might just give
we love when people give us long answers, give us a lot of introspective answers. And for me, my philosophy is there's some rules that are meant to be broken because some rules are meant to protect and some rules are meant to break, you know, are meant to break us. So like, you know, if it's meant to break us, break those rules. But thank you so much for sharing so much with us today.
Yeah, thank you. So our oldest son's name is Cassius Mandela Bythewood. Some rule breaking in there. You know, our youngest son, his name is Toussaint Marcellus Bythewood. So like we named them after some rule breakers. So, you know, no pressure on them, but you know, they can go get it.